Welcome to Treasure Island, the classic novel by Robert Louis Stevenson.
Chapter 19. The Ebb Tide Runs. The coracle, as I had ample reason to know before I was done with her, was a very safe boat for a person of my height and weight, both buoyant and clever in a seaway. But she was the most cross-grained, lopsided craft to manage. Do as you pleased, she always made more leeway than anything else, and turning around and around was the maneuver she was best at. Even Ben Gunn himself had admitted that she was queer to handle till you knew her way. Certainly, I did not know her way. She turned in every direction but the one I wanted to go. Most of the time, I drifted sideways or spun like a top. I'm sure that without the ebb tide to guide me, I never would have reached the ship. By good fortune, paddle as I might, the current kept sweeping me along the channel, and there lay the Hispaniola, right in the fairway, impossible to miss. First she loomed before me like a black blot in the darkness. Then her masts and rigging began to take shape, and soon the whole ship rose before me. The closer I drifted, the stronger the current became, and suddenly I found myself alongside her anchor rope, drawn taut like a bowstring. The idea struck me at once. I would cut the hawser and set the Hispaniola adrift. The strong ebb tide would carry her out to sea like a leaf in a stream. One swift stroke of my knife and the ship would be gone. It seemed simple enough, but then I paused. The hawser was straining hard against the current, and I remembered that cutting such a tight rope was like loosing the kick of a wild horse. If I severed the line suddenly, I'd likely be knocked into the water. I hesitated, unsure what to do. Fortune, however, was with me that night. The light breeze from the southeast had shifted slightly to the southwest, and as the wind caught the ship's bow, the strain on the hawser slackened. The rope dipped into the water, and I felt it go limp in my grasp. Seizing my chance, I took out my knife, opened it with my teeth, and slowly began to saw through the strands. One by one, the fibers gave way until only 2 strands held the ship fast. I paused, waiting for the next gust of wind to loosen the tension further. Then I would strike. Up to that moment, I had scarcely paid attention to the sounds aboard the Hispaniola. But now that I was waiting, I had time to listen. I heard loud, drunken voices. One belonged to Israel Hands, Flint's old gunner. The other was the red-capped pirate. Both men were deep in drink, and their quarreling grew louder by the minute. Once I heard a bottle smash as one of them tossed it out the cabin window into the sea. At first their shouting seemed like it would turn to blows. Oaths flew like hailstones, and every now and then there came forth such an explosion as I thought was sure to end in blows. But each time the quarrel passed off and the voices grumbled lower for a while, until the next crisis came, and in its turn passed away without result. On shore, I could see the glow of the pirates' campfire flickering through the trees. I heard the mournful, droning voice of one of them singing a slow sailor's ballad, a dirge of sorts, full of misery and woe. The song, with its sorrowful drawl and endless verses, seemed a fitting tune for men who had just suffered such a stinging defeat. At last, a gust of wind arrived. The Hispaniola lurched and turned slightly, and the hawser slackened further in my hands. With one swift stroke, I cut the remaining strands. The ship began to drift, swinging slowly on the current. The coracle bumped gently against her hull. I wrought like a fiend, for I expected every moment to be swamped, and since I found I could not push the coracle directly off, I now shoved straight astern. At length I was clear of my dangerous neighbor, and just as I gave the last impulsion, my hands came across a light cord that was trailing overboard across the stern bulwarks. Instantly I grasped it. Why I should have done so I can hardly say. It was at first mere instinct, but once I had it in my hands and found it fast, curiosity began to get the upper hand, and I determined I should have one look through the cabin window. I pulled in hand over hand on the cord, and when I judged myself near enough, rose at infinite risk to about half my height and thus commanded the roof and a slice of the interior of the cabin. The ship and my coracle were now drifting steadily along the channel, following the current out to sea. The ocean slapped quietly against the hull, yet still no alarm came from the pirates. I knew they must be inside, yet no one had noticed the ship's slow movement. I clambered higher and at last caught sight of the cabin's interior. There, under the flickering lamplight, I saw Israel Hands and the red-capped pirate, locked in a furious brawl, hands at each other's throats. Their faces were flushed and furious, their teeth bared like snarling dogs. I shut my eyes to let them grow once more familiar with the darkness. Suddenly, the coracle gave a wild lurch, spinning sharply in the tide. At the same time, the ship swayed and staggered in the current. The speed, in the meantime, had strangely increased. I opened my eyes at once. All round me were little ripples, combing over with a sharp, bristling sound and slightly phosphorescent. The Hispaniola herself, a few yards in whose wake I was still being whirled along, seemed to stagger in her course, and I made sure she also was wheeling to the southward. I glanced over my shoulder, and my heart jumped against my ribs. There, right behind me, was the glow of the campfire. The current had turned at right angles, sweeping round along with it the tall schooner and the little dancing coracle. It went spinning through the narrows for the open sea. Suddenly, the schooner in front of me gave a violent yaw. The voices on board turned to shouts. I could hear feet pounding on the companion ladder, and I knew that the two drunkards had at last been interrupted in their quarrel and awakened to a sense of their disaster. I lay flat in the coracle, bracing myself for the worst. At the end of the straits, I made sure we must fall into some bar of raging breakers, where all my troubles would be ended speedily. And though I could perhaps bear to die, I could not bear to look upon my fate as it approached. So I must have lain for hours, continually beaten to and fro upon the billows, now and again wetted with flying sprays, and never ceasing to expect death at the next plunge. Gradually, weariness grew upon me. At some point, fatigue overtook me. I must have fallen asleep, for I awoke with the morning light breaking over the sea. My mind drifted with strange dreams of home, of the Admiral Benbow, of Dr. Livesley and Mr. Trelawney, and of gold, endless heaps of treasure shining bright like fire.